All right, so everybody, we're super excited to be here and cannot wait to talk to you about hacking the planet. If you've got questions, comments, or complaints, or any well actuallys, we encourage those, but because of time constraints, we're gonna have to ask you to save them to the end. Is that okay? Cool? All right, let's do this thing. So, who are we? I'm Gweethan, I go by Data.
And I'm Amp.
So my background, in short, is I've done real-world cyber ops against targets in all 5 domains, air, land, sea, space, cyberspace, and all across the globe, and I've done it with all 5 of our Five Eyes partners, and I'm also the dad of the kid that made this cool space badge. Shameless plug.
Yeah. And I've traveled all across the globe on ships for like the last 10 years. I've been there in various capacities, as an engineer, as a ship driver, as a mentor, and as a captain, though not at the same time. And so all of those roles involve teaching or learning or practicing the rules of the road. And now I sometimes captain CTF teams, and I talk at DEF CON apparently.
So before we dive in, yes, definitely for her. Me, not so much. Anyway, before we dive in, we want to acknowledge that there's going to be a range of experience in the audience, and that's cool. There are seasoned mariners, the salty, and there are the sea curious on the other end, and everybody in between. We want to make sure that this topic is accessible to everybody, so thank you to the Sea Dogs for helping educate those who are new crewmates, and new crewmates, welcome aboard, and we're glad you're here. And for those of you who are new, port means left, and starboard means right. If you forget, port and left have the same number of letters. But first, let's talk motivation. Let's talk motivation, because if you haven't thought about it, maritime matters. Okay, here's the Earth. 70% of the surface is water, and as the fish are probably thrilled with that one fact, the business people will be more thrilled with the rest, in that 90% of the world's cargo moves via water, and about $17 trillion, or about 70% of the world's annual trade, moves by water. Because there's so much water, the world has access everywhere, right? But that access also presents vulnerabilities as well. In short, when vessels stall, markets fall, is a phrase you could remember. But at the end of the day, maritime matters. To hack the planet, we need more than just a few lines of code. We need to target more than just 1 or 2 systems. We need to target people, processes, and expectations. The goal is to expose the inherent systemic fragility in maritime operations, and that fragility operates at layer 9, not layer 8, layer 9, which is people's confidence in the system. We're going to show you how to hack the planet, and then hopefully some ways to defend it. The most observant among us will probably have noticed that in the largest bodies of water, there are very few actual lanes in the road. There are very few visible lanes. So what happens when traffic like this exists, but with ships? Never fear, the COLREGs are here.
This is my chance to plug the COLREGs. If you don't know the rules, you can't effectively break the rules. So those of you who were in the audience early, thanks for being here. You've got some books. Everybody else, they're available on Amazon for like $15 or a PDF. Go learn the rules.
Oops. So COLREGs, what's a COLREG? COLREG is collision regulations. It's the nautical rules of the road that mariners are expected to follow. And in case the COLREGs by themselves did not sate your thirst for nuanced nautical navigation knowledge, US Code Title 33's got your back. Oh, sorry, those are CFRs. And it has 3 volumes, but you say, but that's just for the US. What about the rest of the world? There's more than just the US out there. The International Maritime Organization has an answer for you in the form of 2 more volumes and a supplement that is somehow longer than those volumes themselves, which is weird. But whatever. Altogether, you're looking at 4,000 pages of fun. And everyone's supposed to follow all those rules. What happens if we don't? Super container ships, like this one, actually weigh in empty at about 440 million pounds. No fuel, no cargo. But that much steel and that much weight doesn't make it secure. To the contrary, ships have a hard outside and a soft, gooey inside. Essentially, these vessels are like little cities with their own industrial control systems, their own SCADA, their own often wildly out-of-date IT. They run systems with protocols developed in the 60s. with no authentication, no encryption. They run open Wi-Fi networks. They run operational technology, OT, like most sites do. They prioritize reliability and uptime over security. And according to the Maritime Cyber Attack Database, which the NHL Stendon University of Applied Sciences runs, there have been over 200 reported cyber attacks against maritime companies and ships since 2020, which for those of you that are quick at math, it's about 1 per week. Assuming that the normal underreporting rate applies, that number suddenly skyrockets to 1 successful maritime attack every 4 to 8 hours of every day, of every week, of every year for nearly the past 5 years. And it turns out it's worse than that, Jim. Even on the largest of these ships, there are usually only about 20 to 30 crew aboard, and those people are there to do specific jobs. And rarely do those include cybersecurity. Like this team here, they have a very specific set of skills. They're not a blue team though, they're not incident response, they're watch officers, not InfoSec analysts. In fact, they're pretty much blind as to the cybersecurity of many of the onboard systems, which is why this attack path works.
Okay, so what is the attack path? This is not a technical talk, but what we're going to do is talk about the rules 4 through 19 in those books that I just handed out. Statistically speaking, if you're on a ship, you see another ship, you actually have a 75% chance of doing the right thing in whatever maneuver you're supposed to make by not turning to port. And what that means for the hackers out there is if you want to do the wrong thing, aka break the rules, you probably are going to have the greatest chance of success by turning to port. It's a very simple attack. But our attack works because there are norms, and we are abusing the norms. And it's not just a technical hack, it's a little bit more. So the easiest way to describe it, if we don't have mariners in the audience, is if you're driving down the road and you're just enjoying your cruise, you're expecting everyone's gonna follow the rules and stay in their lane, and suddenly you see something like this. There's a feeling in your chest, whether it's anger or fear or just some sort of reaction, right? Because why is this guy coming right at me? They shouldn't be. And licensed mariners who see this have a similar reaction. They might not be the one who's at fault in this scenario, but they also have a little bit of liability because under the rules, everybody involved in the situation has to maneuver to avoid collision. And if they don't take that proper and effective action, then they're possibly going to have their license revoked or their company's going to be really mad at them. And furthermore, even if they do successfully avoid a collision in this instance, they've now expended a lot of extra fuel. They've kind of come off of course from their intended track, and that can also hold some sort of accountability to their parent company. So if you're the hacker here, what are the chances that you're going to actually cause a collision or an effect that you want just by turning a ship to port? It's going to take knowing more context than you actually have available in this situation. Just turning something from right to left in a NIMIA sentence is not going to do a whole lot for you because you don't know who else is around you. You need other information like the mass of the ship, the distance to the nearest shoal water, the distance to the ship that you're closest to. And those things matter because if you think of, for instance, the motor vessel Dolly incident, this is the Key Bridge, right? It got hit by a ship. The amount of mass that was involved there at the time of collision, you had a force equal to, I've read about this online, but it's like the Saturn V rocket, okay? How are you going to possibly reverse the momentum of the ship in time to stop that collision? You really can't. So even if you don't hit each other, even if you don't hit a bridge, you're still creating a cost here and you're still creating a effect. And that is the fear that's in the mariner. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Because this isn't just risk, right? Increased likelihood of an event, and it's not just increased impact. It's actually going to be not just a technical attack, but also the human risk. The chance that somebody, like a deer in the headlights, is gonna freeze, panic, or do the wrong thing when you turn the ship to port. Okay, well, but wait, you're saying, that's all well and good in theory, but there's no way this actually happens and causes real issues. Right, Data?
Well, we probably wouldn't ask that question if the answer wasn't, well, of course it does. I hate to tell you, but people doing the wrong thing at sea in an emergency is actually pretty common. In 2012, the cruise liner Costa Concordia sailed just a bit too close to the shore and ran aground, and tragically 32 people died and 64 people were injured, and the total costs were over $2 billion with a B dollars. In 2017, the U.S. Navy destroyer USS John S. McCain turned to port in proximity of a Liberian tanker, and the collision cost 10 sailors their lives, and the damages were over $100 million. Neither ship was going above 11 miles per hour. It was slow. So what caused the accident? Was it sabotage? Was it Liberian treachery? No. The McCain was trying to pass the tanker, and it lost control. But these are all one-offs, you say. Single incidents of people messing up. Well, what about this? Earlier this year, 116 Iranian tankers and cargo ships were simultaneously and remotely hacked. While there's no evidence the attacker got into the control systems, they were able to isolate the communication systems, effectively isolating every crew member from each other and the tankers from the shore and other vessels. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. But this shows the importance of being able to follow the rules of the road in an emergent situation. But does it scale is really the question, right? 116 tankers, the number of ships out there in the waters of the oceans and waterways around the world, way more than 116. So can it scale, right? 116 is not nearly enough to hack the planet. Not yet. For that something we need more powerful. We need something that's more powerful. We need to stop making tech the final destination and start making it a means to an end. So let's look at how we can scale the impact of our attack. There's always discussion about economies of scale, so let's start with the economy. We just talked about Costa Concordia, right? One ship, one incident, not a systemic issue. Yet it dramatically impacted the cruise line industry. An estimated $5 to $6 billion of revenue was lost across the entire cruise sector in the year following. That's one incident, an accident no less. What happens when it impacts more than one ship? Here is the Suez Canal on March 11th of 2021. These green arrows, they point at ships of a zoomed in image of that thing right there. At the time, everything was going smoothly through one of the world's most important shipping lanes. Then on the 23rd, a container ship ran aground and blocked the port for a week. Here's the Suez only 4 days after that grounding. Yes, there are clouds, it's tough to see the ship, so I'll zoom in for you. Check it out. That's a lot more ships. And that's only one portion of it. There was a queue of almost 400 ships, 100 kilometers long, just waiting to transit for almost 2 weeks. Think of the economic impact of that. And that was because of an unintentional grounding. One incident, one ship, one accident, albeit in a sensitive area. What happens when we make this intentional? When air travel was shut down after 9/11, an estimated $22 billion was lost as governments and the public worked to reconcile the world that was and the world that is in the wake of these deliberate attacks. These attacks exposed systemic weaknesses, which were then addressed over the days, months, and years following. But those patches did nothing for the thousands of victims or their families who suffered that day and every day thereafter. So yes, our impacts can scale. But don't think in terms of crews or ships. Think waterways. Think tracking and logistics system. Think ports. Finally, some of you were saying ports mean you're going to talk nerdy to me, right? We are, just not in the way you'd expect. We just talked about scaling the impact of our attacks. One way to scale that impact is to find pressure points, places where mechanisms that govern the behavior of a disproportionate part of the whole. That's one reason why cyber is so important, and I think we all know that. Twiddling the right bit in or two in one place can massively impact something on the other side of the planet. Said another way, the right bit in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world. So what are these points? They're not points, they're ports. This is where the lifeblood of the global economy flows. Remember that 9/11 cost the air traffic industry about $22 billion? That was over the 12 months following the attacks. That's $60 million a day. That's a lot. I'd love to have $60 million a day. When the longshoremen, however, at the Port of Los Angeles went on strike during COVID, estimates place the economic impact of that at $3.1 billion per day. Not for the year. That's 51.4 times more economic impact than the entirety of the year following 9/11 to the airline industry. To be fair, that strike only lasted 3 days, and a lot of the actual impact was mitigated by overtime and rerouting traffic. But what happens if those other ports were also inoperative for one reason or another? For those who've never been to a port before, let's do some port scanning. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to enumerate some potential vulnerabilities. Some of these have obvious vulnerabilities and others are less. Automated cranes, like most operational technology, often have no appreciable cyber defense. Inventory tracking is often similarly trust-based. Robotic container movement is also operational technology. Customs, think of all the requirements to make customs work so they can do their job, and downtime is not part of that equation. AIS is an unauthenticated, unencrypted VHF-based technology from the 1960s. Every big ship out there has it. It's readable and spoofable by anyone. It's easy. I've done it. GPS spoofing and jamming. Again, every ship's got it, and the body of work on GPS attacks grows with every single DEFCON. Digital charts. More and more of every ship is getting automated, including navigation. Many ships no longer have paper charts, just like how many cars no longer have atlases in them. The Google Maps of the seas is just easier, and 99% of the time, it's way more accurate and convenient than the paper version. It also presents a delicious attack surface to create your own navigation hazards. Why wait for an accident when you can cause one? Use modified charts to tell a ship that a navigation hazard isn't there, and then let the ship strike it, creating an even bigger hazard. Or you could do what the cool kids are doing today, specifically releasing ransomware into these aging and undefended systems. Or if you are the Da Vinci of chaos, you could create one of those navigation hazards where there isn't one yet by using targeted malware to, say, capsize a ship, or mess with ballast pumps, or fire suppression, or other systems using very targeted malware. Oh, and of course, there are the databases that link all this stuff together in the cloud that present terrific opportunities to do all sorts of nefarious things. Now, before you get all excited thinking this is some new attack vector, spoiler, it's not. Before you go thinking that this hasn't been done before, it has. But to our knowledge, it hasn't been done in this domain, with this broad a target, at this scale. We're going to show you how public trust has been abused and weaponized in the past, and then help you see just how big an issue this can be. Let's start in October of '82. Back then, medications did not have safety seals. Abusing that trust, one or more actors laced bottles of Tylenol with potassium cyanide. It killed children, it killed adults, and Tylenol spent over $325 million in today's money to recall over 31 million bottles of the painkiller, and to develop, manufacture, and deploy a new foil seal that we all take for granted today. It took years and huge amounts of money to recover the trust that was broken by what could have been a lone wolf actor. What about a trust issue that's been around since the 1890s? All of you know it. I don't know if you recognize it or not, though. It's still pervasive today. The idea that hazardous things like razor blades, poison, or even Tootsie Rolls are in our Halloween candy. They're gross. Tootsie Rolls are gross. I said it on stage, now it's fact. There were fewer than 90 documented incidents between 1958 and 1983 in the United States of people doing something nefarious to candy in Halloween. But despite that fact, the mere threat of a threat, even if it is generally unsubstantiated, still has the power to change behaviors. How many people hear, oh, check your kids' Halloween candy, right? We still hear it. It's still a part of our culture. It impacts hundreds of millions of people. What happens if there is a substantiated threat? 9/11 did that more than 2 decades ago, right? More than 2 decades later, we're still making wardrobe choices when we go to the airport to make things less awful when we're there. We've got second and third order sociological effects in generations whose parents were not born when the towers were attacked. Again, the point is not the specific organization or the specific behavior. The point is the fact that a single incident or even the threat of an incident can permanently change the behavior of a country, a society, or even the world.
All right, we're running towards the end of our talk here, but just give it a thought. What would it take to break the weakest link in the chain of trust that we have today? We can't just crash some ships or break some cranes or drop tables from a database. That's all amateur hour. The real impact is going to be that global scale hit that's going to get everyone involved in the maritime operations chain. The mariners, the customers, the manufacturers, the harbor masters, law enforcement, owners, investors, insurance underwriters, everyone. The weakest link in that chain, what is it going to take to make it break and give? So if cruise lines, Tylenol, Halloween candy, air travel have all been done, what does it mean if maritime is next? So think of the second, third, and fourth order effects on financial markets, quarterly projections, and on you.
But wait, there's more. So many of the institutions that we rely on have the same vulnerability, which is trust at scale. How many of you check the power coming into your home? That it's the right voltage, right phase, right amperage, and have mechanisms in place to mitigate or regulate any issues? What about water? How often do you test your water to make sure that it's meeting EPA or equivalent guidelines for your home? How about healthcare, pharmaceuticals, surgeries, medication administration, clinical results, and more? What is a stock market besides an expression of trust? A nation's currency is an expression of trust in that nation's economy. Ask yourself, how often do I press the I trust button and don't even realize it? What happens when an anarchist decides they're going to hit all of these at the same time? It's entirely possible, and if we don't do something about it now, our trust in these systems will be attacked.
Okay, so just like a ship's systems being subverted to turn it left at the wrong time can butterfly affect its way into a global loss of confidence in maritime operations, systems of systems are reliant on public trust and confidence. As we mentioned, utilities, healthcare, financial markets. When the confidence in them is deliberately, systematically, and publicly attacked, you suddenly have fear in the vessel operators, the owners, the investors, the passengers, the consumers, the governments that are involved don't just have fear, but fear at scale. And fear at scale is how you create one of the most powerful societal exploits ever. That's how you hack the planet. And it starts by assuring a ship to port. And that's pretty much our talk.
So,
But fear the con.
there we go. So, we talked about this. We said, think about this. You are here at DEF CON. You're part of the biggest hacking conference in the world. Help us defend the world's economy by getting involved. Stress test equipment, demand more of maritime equipment manufacturers, join the Maritime Hacking Village. Be part of Capture the Flags, CTFs. Find ways to help reinforce the trust we place in all these systems that make our society function. Help us keep our ships turning to starboard. Thank you.
We offered them recommendations.
So we did say we would provide some recommendations as to how you can help fix this. We're happy to talk about it afterwards. We're getting the signals in the back. None of these should come as any shock to anybody, but at the end of the day, remember, cyber hygiene and network segmentation, stuff like that, is nothing new to us, but to the maritime sector and to a lot of these institutions that we rely on, that we give our trust to every day, very few of them actually implement it. So demand more of these institutions. Thank you. Yeah, so I think, how much time we have for questions? None? Okay, cool. If there are questions, we do have a mic, or you can shout.
Sure. Is there anything you got to get about DSC?
Digital reflective column.
Yeah.
Specifically consider that in here, but
Yeah, I don't know if the camera can hear us. What was the question?
digital selective calling.
Using DSC instead of AIS?
Yeah, NS is one thing, DSC does a different function, but you can still come up with a scenario. It's like DSC, you can do different things. You can damage different trust. You can damage, which to send someone like, this is my thing, this is where I'm at.
Right. So you're asking if anyone has done looking at DSC as opposed to looking at AIS? So yes, there's definitely been research that's done on each of these systems, because any aperture aboard a vessel, there is concern with, right? Because if it can come in, that means you can do bad stuff to something that's linked to it. One of the challenges, though, is that it's going to be upgrading the entire fleet of all companies in the world. Like, there's a lot of mass there, right? So,
And I'm just going to add that because there's a trust factor here that you're actually receiving that from the person you think you are, you could probably play the human side a lot more than necessarily the technology side and send somebody a message that, grandma's in the hospital, I don't know, something like that, but on that sort of a scale, maybe with more of a maritime flavor, and get an effect.
Yeah, as a recovering Red Team member, I'll tell you that playing with people's hearts or playing with their wallets will get them to do all sorts of crazy things and ignore all the warnings in the world.
Thank you.
Thanks. Other questions?
So many? Okay, well,
Let's talk after.
yeah, that'd be great.
Cool.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks everybody.
You're awesome.